It is true that not necessarily we always start from the same point, but we have always been able to find the synthesis and to end up with the same opinion. Now, having said that, I will start my presentation with a quiz. I'm not going to ask you to raise the hands, but maybe we do. So what is that? What is that you see in the, you know the answer, don't reply. What is that you see in this picture? I give you three options. Is this a chair? It could be. It is an element of modern furniture intended to host for a more or less prolonged period of time a noble part of the human body. Or is this a yellow paper lying on a chair? What is the reality behind that? What is the truth?
It's a slide.
It's a slide? It could be. That's another way of looking at things. The point is everything I'm going to say and everything we are going to talk about is about communication. It's about information, and it's about how you communicate what you want to communicate to the people without misleading them or with the intention of misleading them. And I mean, it's not a construction product there, I guess. It looks like a drink. But the point and the information there is that there is a lot of information already there behind products that we sell and we buy. And that is not always hitting the final consumer or hitting the target, but the information is somewhere there in the system. Is that good or is bad? I mean, we have different opinions around Europe if giving more information is good or bad. I don't think it's necessarily good or bad. We are more interested in what information you deliver. But there is the need to structure that information, to make that information relevant. And that's, for example, why Tapani was saying, we don't need to add a lot of things in the DOP, but we need to focus on what is essential. And in order to explain this, I'm taking a bit of a larger way. One of the many things that are happening in the world is that we are discussing in Europe, but with the international partners, how we can address the issue that when you do LCAs, you are confronted with a lot of databases, and sometimes the databases, you cannot use them because they are not internally consistent, or they come out with strange information. So there is this idea which is growing of how we can build a shared single database. Now, why is that important? Because it's something that has something also to do with what we are discussing here. So let's imagine that we have a number of databases which are competing, and we want to put them in a single database so that then people can look into this cloudy database and extract the information they need. Now, all this seems very nice and appealing and catching and easy to implement. This is a nightmare. It's one of the many nightmares I'm dealing with, apart from the path. So basically, in order to get there, you need some filters. You need some common grounds. One common ground is the language, because these databases, they don't speak the same language. There are issues in format, issues on nomenclature, metadata, and Michael can tell you the whole story later if he wants to. But that's not enough. I mean, even if you get to the same format, nomenclature, metadata, and review, and etc., it still wouldn't work. You need some other things like quality. You need the data to be representative of what you need. So if you don't build all this, the fact that information is there would not help you at all. So having only information is not enough. Having only EPD is not enough. Now, this may be a real case, or maybe I invented. I mean, in several of my slides, something is factual, is real, and something is invented. It's up to you to understand which is what. This is an example. So we have a member state who is doing a big procurement, and they want to change all the toilets in their buildings, and they want to be green. So they go to their architect and they say, okay, please find something that we can sell to our members and our electors that we are green. They scratch their heads and they say, okay, we have heard about EPDs. They are coming up with numbers. Let's go in that way. Let's do that way. So they take 2 EPDs on toilets, and of course you find all the nice information that you usually find in EPD. And they start looking, okay, shall we buy the A or the B? Let's see who is doing better. And if you look at numbers, you might get convinced that the B is better than the A. Then they are ready to spend to invest tens of millions of euro in buying B toilets. And then they, by chance, they get confronted with a study done by the Commission, where the different toilets have been assessed using the same method, the same baseline, the same representative product, and you get a completely different picture, where you are suddenly confronted that it's not neither A or B, but they are both giving information based on the system that they prefer. Because at the end of the day, the problem with EPD, I mean, if you look in Japan they have more PCR than EPD published, because basically everyone is developing his own PCR, his own system, and then doing the EPD based on that. So the EPD as such, sometimes they are not worth the paper they are written on, but that's not always the case. The problem is we need to have a single system, a single PCR, reference PCR, where the EPD then can be developed. And that's why 15804 is great, because it's starting to give us that common reference. And that's why the eco-platform is a great idea, because it's moving into that direction. So the EPD concept is good, it's workable, we have to improve that, but the EPD as they are today, I don't think is something we should rely too much upon. Then, we want to build a green building, not a greenhouse, that's different. And maybe this could look like, okay, we need some information on thermal insulation, we might need some information on roofs, we might need some information on photovoltaic, we might need some information on paints, we might need some information, of course, on hot and cold water pipes. Now, if you think these are the 5 pilots that we have on construction products, that's correct. So this is one of the factual information that I'm providing. The point is, someone is telling us, okay, basically what you need to have for assessing the building is just collect EPDs on the different components, add them up, put something on top of that, and that's the assessment of the building. Now, I'm not going to address if this is correct or not. I just want to highlight that if you want to go that way, you still need that all the information on thermal insulation, hot and pipes, paints, and all the rest are produced according to the same procedure so that you can simply add things up. Now, someone was saying we don't have to bother industry, why industry should be bothered, they are in a crisis. I'm not questioning that, Christoph, far from that. But the point is that industry is doing that. And this is not only the construction sectors. When you look at the analysis of why industries has been investing a lot of resources in sustainability, you will get a lot of interesting information that by doing that, the more proactive are actually gaining a lot of money. And they are gaining money because they are cutting the costs in manufacturing, they are increasing their market shares, they are improving the credibility of their mark. So there is a lot to gain in this action, and that's why things have become complicated, because once industry started to do that, then we have seen labels appearing here and there and blooming up, assessment schemes, as Karen showed, just multiplying. And I mean, we like biodiversity, I mean, DG Environment, we like biodiversity, but biodiversity in this sense is not that good, because it's proliferation. And then when you have proliferation, you start to have problems in the internal market. And we know, because, I mean, until there is something common, the member states are authorized to come out with their own legislation. And some of them started to do so, and you are aware of which they are. Is that a problem? Yes, because it could create problems with internal market rules. And we have to assess on a case by case. But it's also a problem for competitiveness, because as green marketing is one of the ways to acquire market shares and to become more competitive, there are those who are really producing good products and trying to sell that information. And I mean, I'm sure that the unanimity of you fall into that category. But there are also companies who are misleading the stakeholders and using that information just to put competitors out of the market. And this is especially something which is true for non-European based companies. So we have to find a way also to deal with that. We have to find a way to understand which is the right and the credible information and which is not. And then there is all the problem with the consumer, with the fact that basically people are not believing anymore in the market driven by companies. That's clear. All the polls that we do, we see a clear trend going down. When they say it's company marketing, we don't believe it. There is member states behind, there is an institution behind, we can still believe it. But even there are signals that the trust is decreasing. So for all these reasons that I tried to summarize, it was not the Commission initiative to come out with a footprint, and just keep that in mind, it was member states asking us. It was the Council coming to us and say, look, we need something common because we want to avoid all this proliferation, all these problems. Please, Commission, come out with something harmonized. And that was the work that we as Commission started in 2008 on carbon, as was correctly reminded by Christoph. And then soon it was clear that carbon was not enough. For some product groups, is even misleading. For example, food-related products. So we had to take the larger picture. And then we came out with the communication and with the pilot. And the pilot has a number of objectives that has already been addressed by Karin, so I will not spend too much time on that. And this pilot, I said half joking that is a nightmare. But in reality, this pilot is a huge success for us. I mean, when you look at the numbers that we have in this pilot phase, no one was expecting that. We have more than 400 industries actively working in the technical secretariats, investing their own resources in developing these common rules. In most of the pilots, we have the majority of the market represented there. So we are not talking of small people or small companies. There are also SMEs, but they are also the big players. The number of meetings is absolutely unmanageable, but that's my problem. And we have all the different stakeholders represented and actively participating. We have the SMEs, which often we hear that SMEs, they don't know LCA, they are not interested in LCA, we shouldn't bother them. But when you look at who is participating in the pilots, then we have SMEs at an incredibly high percentage, which is extremely good. And it's not an European pilot. If you look at the geography, the map there, the pilot is really hit the whole world. So we have companies from the American South and North, we have companies from China, from Japan. In the coming food-related pilots, we will probably have companies from Australia, New Zealand, and other countries, also in Africa. So it's really getting big. And also, if you look at the numbers of new registered people in our website and the visitors, it's really something that we were not expecting. And why is that? It's because there is the need for that. Because strangely enough, usually when at the time was DG Environment and chef de file for this, usually we get lobbied not to do things. We are used to that, we know how to play the game. But in this case, industry was coming to see us to tell, please do something because we are having a problem with that. And then what we did was, okay, let's look at the existing standards and let's build on that because we don't want to reinvent something if there is no need. And so we looked at all the standards existing at that time, that was 2010, including the 15804, the version that was available at that time, including of course, the ISO, the LCA-related ISO standards. And it is important, allow me to spend maybe one of my few last minutes on this, because the link between policy and standard is extremely important that you understand that. And there are people outside that, in good faith or in bad faith, are trying to use this argument to cause some tension and some problems. Now, what is a policy? I tried to come out with a nice definition of a policy. This is a set of basic principles and guidelines that we formulate in order to achieve some long-term goals for the benefit of everybody. And then I looked for the definition of standard, and this comes from ISO, so I trust this definition. A standard is a document that has to provide requirements, specification, guidelines or characteristics that can be used consistently to ensure that materials, products, processes, and services are fit for purpose. So the point is that the standards are tools to be used to achieve policy objectives. It's not the other way around. So if we have a policy objective and we don't have an existing standard that help us to achieve those policy objectives, we don't have to change the policy to fit the standard. It's the other way around. It is the standard that has to change and adapt to deliver the policy objectives. Keep this in mind. It's extremely important when we'll be discussing why we are doing a pilot on PEF when we have 15804. I think Karin already showed these slides, so I will not address that. Now, another of the criticism that I'm getting is why you're insisting so much on this bloody benchmarking, why you want to do the benchmarking. Someone was before saying, okay, we are talking about sustainability, no one has defined what sustainability is. We keep talking about green products, no one has defined what a green product is. Now, we are trying to, I'm not saying to come with a solution, but at least to address this question. Can we find a way to define what is the average performance of a certain product so that we can say whatever is performing better, I mean, is relatively better than the average and worse, like we did for the energy label. If you don't have a common agreed category rules, of course you cannot go into that direction. We are clear there in the PEF recommendation. If there are no rules agreed by the majority of players, no comparison. But if you have those rules, then you can imagine to get to the situation where you can make a distinction between one product and another. But then the question becomes, is it possible? I mean, do we have enough knowledge, data, information to make this difference? And is it always possible? Or there are cases where it's not possible? And then maybe a question which is more, I would like more to address to you, is it desirable or useful to have this benchmark? Now we have to address all these questions for all products, not only for construction products. And it is important, as was reminded by someone, that the PEF is horizontal. So we can allow for sector-oriented interpretation, but there are certain framework rules that have to remain constant because supply chains are interlinked. So we need to be sure also to ensure the consistency between this different supply chain. And the final question is, do you want it? Do you want to get compared or not? When you come to lobby me, you tell me, no, I don't think it's possible, I don't think it's desirable and useful. This is what we hear as comments by many of you as stakeholders, not just construction products. When we look into the reality, that's exactly what you are trying to do. You are trying to make differentiation against your competitor. So what is what there? This is what we are trying to understand from the pilot perspective. Is that this is not just technically possible, so we have to abandon the idea, or it's more a competition issue, so it is technically possible, but maybe it's not desirable from a policy perspective. These are the kind of questions we want to answer. The way forward is exactly as Caroline said. It is the Commission clear line that we don't want in 3 years' time a 15804 standard and a PEF method living in parallel. That we don't want. We will do all our best not to fall into that scenario. And I can assure you, I mean, I can give you my words, that scenario will not happen. And that doesn't mean, and we don't want that, it means that it's a fight 15804 versus PEF. I think that would be equally wrong. The point is that the 15804, and I keep repeating this, is a very good standard, which was developed under a mandate issued in 2004. Now we are in 2014. Knowledge evolved, policy needs evolved. So it's not the 15804 fault if certain things are not addressed in the standard as it is now. They couldn't forecast the future, but our needs have evolved. So the point is, can we find, let me call it a compromise, or is a way in between, so that we can improve the things which are missing in the 15804, maybe also changing the things in PEF which will not be working because either technically not possible or too ambitious, so that simply we combine the two, and from 17 onwards we have a single reference that we are all happy with. Keeping the door open to improvement, because Tapani is extremely correct in saying that it's true that industry needs a vision from us. We cannot change things every 3 years because that would be disruptive for them. But it's equally true that we cannot set things in stones and marble them and cement them if then reality changed. So we need to keep this kind of flexible approach, but with a clear clarity of vision. And how we want to implement that? Having Teppfa with the Copper Institute in this pilot was extremely helpful. It was not easy to convince construction products, and we had a lot of interesting discussion with Christophe about the usefulness of all these exercises. And let me allow to say that I was so pleased that we found some proactive companies and associations that really understood the potential of this. And then we had more, so now we have 5 pilots. And these 5 pilots will tell us what needs to be changed in the path to get closer to what industry needs. At the same time, I hope that the SEN will be receptive about what needs to be changed in the ISO, in the EN 15804. And this is not given for granted. Frankly speaking, at the beginning, they were not very open to do any change. Now things are changing. So we want, and I have to thank Christophe, because Christophe one day came to me with a very good idea that I immediately married, if we can say that, which was, okay, let's be the kind of working group or a task force, I don't know how we will call it, where the different people, the different pilots working on construction products related, the Commission, SEN, and CPE as an umbrella organization, we sit together, and while working in the different pilots, we also analyze already the lessons learned so that we can prepare the ground for this revision that we hopefully will take place on both sides. So this working group hasn't kicked off yet because we wanted the first consultation period to end up, but now we will start working probably in June. So I still have to come out with an agenda and timing, but this working group will start, and I think it will be key to solve all the issues, both technical and political, that might raise. And there, again, you will not see only DG Enterprise or only DG Environment. You will see always the Commission with all the different services, maybe not 14 DGs, but I mean all the services which have an interest, direct or indirect interest, into this work. So what will happen, and this is my last slide, Mr. Chairman, so be relaxed. I can spend 1 hour on this if you like, but this is my last one. What will happen after? As you know, the pilot will end in December 2016. We cannot derogate from that. Then in 2017, we will have 2 assessments. And this is, again, something new. I mean, a lot of things in this pilot are unusual for Commission standards in the sense of preparing policy. We are having pilots in the pilot. So one of the innovative things is that usually when we do things like that, we have our internal discussion, we have our internal inter-service group meeting where we discuss the results of these experiences. We will have it, of course, because it's key, it's important for us to find the common ground, but we have also decided to have an independent external evaluation of the pilot in terms of the process, in terms of the information, and in terms of the future use of the information. So we are now in the process of selecting people who are not involved at all in the pilot, who are not involved in the technical secretariat, who are not members of the steering committee or any of the body, that will accompany us during these 3 years, monitoring us and then reporting back to all the different stakeholders with their own opinion. So once we will have these 2 reports, then we will start the traditional policy process. Because then the idea is, once we have all this information, to look at the existing legislation and say, okay, when there is a review of a certain legislation, let's say, I don't know, the eco-label or the green public procurements or the procurement directive, can this existing legislation benefit from the information we gathered during the pilot, or is it not worth? And each time we will have an impact assessment, we will have a stakeholder consultation. The political process will be the traditional one. At the same time, in the context of the 7th EAP, which is the Environmental Action Plan, we also have a specific task for the Commission, that is to look at the overall product-related policy framework and try to understand if what we have in place today, is it enough, or there is something missing piece of policy that we still need to have a more consistent and coherent framework. So we will also look into that and see if in that context the information that we'll gather through the environmental footprint pilot can be useful or not. So this was my introduction. I will start my real presentation. No, I'm joking.
We have another 20 minutes.
Thank you very much for your attention.